let's move on to our weekly dose of common sense on the big headlines here and overseas from our resident outsider, editor at The Spectator magazine, Rowan Dean. Great to have you on the show, Rowan. It's not Tuesday without you. Lots to talk about, Hey, I have to start with what I thought was a point of irony today. I watched a lot of the swearing-in vision here on Sky of both Houses of Parliament. Of course, a lot of them, particularly on the coalition side, less on the Labor side, swore an oath, and those that swore an oath swore an oath with a holy book. Most of those holy books were Bibles, so they take an oath on the Bible to get their job, and dear old Israel Folau quotes the Bible and loses his job. How does it make sense?
Exactly. Well, I just hope none of those pages fell open on those parts that Israel Folau had referred to in his various tweets. But you're right. We put the Bible at the very centre of our trust. We put the Bible at the centre of our entire legal system, our entire social system, and yet poor old Israel Folau goes and just refers to parts of the Bible, and all hell breaks loose. All hell literally breaks loose. But you have to wonder what is it people want? Do they want, with things like religious freedom and so on, do they want a kind of sanitised version of religion that they feel touchy-feely with and comfortable with, the kumbaya version of religion, or not? Because if you are putting your hand on the book has all sorts of pretty serious theological discussions and debates within it. And I guess, are our parliamentarians supposed to be taking it literally, or is it just pure symbolism?
Well, look, and to be fair, not all of the Christian faith, variant churches of the Christian faith, rely on a literal interpretation of the Bible.
True.
Some are very, very much about the text of the Bible. The passage sort of quotes back to you all the time. There are others, I have to say the Catholics are a bit more like this. They have their own catechism, their own theology that sits inside the Holy Book. But you raise a point of religious freedom. I have a nervousness about legislating religious freedom and doing it adequately.
Absolutely.
So that it doesn't stop us having an open debate, as we should in a country like Australia, about some of the tenets of all religious faith that might rub up against Australian culture or Australian law. Now, we talked about this last week, the UN, there's a move inside the UN for there to be sort of the categorisation of Islamophobia. And so you won't be able to discuss anything to do with Islam without being charged with that offence, but Christianity is open slather. I suspect Judaism is open slather. I'm more comfortable with arguing freedom of speech in relation to Folau, but how does the government handle this issue? Because the report's on the desk, there's an expectation from a lot of religious organisations and a promise before the same-sex marriage plebiscite that things would be protected. Where do they go from here?
Well, the trouble is, Peter, they're now trying to unscramble the egg, and the only reason, and I repeated this so many times, I was blue in the face during the same-sex marriage debate, was I personally, and most people I know, have no problem whatsoever with gay people getting married or whatever. But the problem was that we were enshrining this anti-discrimination laws into our system, which suddenly meant that anti-discrimination took precedent over what was originally just taken for granted as freedom of speech or freedom of religion. And I'm really nervous, as I think people are increasingly becoming, that I just don't trust our politicians to get this right, because and the bottom line is you can't escape, I'm sorry to say it, you can't escape that whatever you legislate for Christianity, you are also legislating for all sorts of other religions, some of which you may not find as peace-loving as perhaps Christianity is. So whatever you are doing,
could be organisations like Scientology. I mean, it could be right off the spectrum.
Precisely. But even if we just look at Islam, and you mentioned Islamophobia, if we're saying that Israel Folau has the right to say that gays are going to hell, well, what's to stop the local imam putting up his hand and saying, well, hang on, I believe that gays should X, Y, and Z in line with Islamic teaching.
Hang on. We have plenty of cases where there are imams who do that. We had a celebrated imam.
And are we going to legislate that?
A celebrated imam about women and hanging them up by their breasts.
Absolutely.
And all sorts of terrible things. We also know there are broader issues. We look at Jeremy Corbyn. We'll get to him in a moment. in the UK in anti-Semitism. So I think this is a fraught area,
You can guarantee, Peter, that whatever is legislated, that the way our laws always go and our lefty lawyers that we now have, whatever laws are brought in, no matter the good intentions behind them, inevitably it will be the left who take advantage of them and they will be used against conservatives. We've seen this time and time again. And if you also have Islamophobia being introduced via 18C or other means, we will be in a situation where Islam is free to pretty much preach whatever it wants to, but we are not allowed to criticise it because that is Islamophobic. So the political ideology of Islam will be meshed into the religious ideology and we won't be able to criticise it. And that's a real danger which I'm not sure our politicians are on top of.
Well, another thing that I picked up that we've discussed, and I know you're interested in it in the UK, was how organised the Labor Party is in training up people to go on the national broadcaster, in their case the BBC, but it has echoes here in Australia, training them up to go on, running out all the pro-Corbyn lines, defending his anti-Semitism. It's a really orchestrated, let's call it re-education camp, and it's been going on for some time. Now, the BBC has faced calls from inside the Conservatives to fess up to what's going on. Tell me more.
Yeah, well, it's a mob called Neon, and they basically literally train people to go and become commentators, like we're doing now, sitting on chat shows and talking on political panels and so on. But they actually go and train them what to say from a hardcore left-wing perspective to actually be selling the Corbynista, the neo-Marxist agenda. Now, this is sinister, but it's also pretty amusing. I can't tell you the number of panel chat shows and things I've sat on in the past, particularly on the ABC, but not exclusively, also on Sky and elsewhere, where you'll see the left-wingers, and, you know, they may not have been to training camps, but they've certainly got a slab of written notes there that they dare not deviate from. And, in fact, I used to enjoy myself taking the mickey out of some of them and saying, are you reading your notes now? Because a lot of them will. So the same thing happens here, make no doubt about it. And, of course, those on the left would say, no, that's happening from right-wingers as well. There's all these right-winger think tanks who are sitting reading their notes as well. There may well be, but I've certainly never seen any of them, and I've certainly never said anything on a show that's anything other than my opinion, and I haven't been to any re-education training camps. There you go. But the fact that it's...
But on this show, people's backgrounds are declared. Like, everybody knows I was the Chief of Staff to a coalition Prime Minister. Everybody knows everyone else's background. We declare it at the start of the show, and we have a variety of opinions. The BBC tends not to have a variety of opinions, and the ABC certainly doesn't here in Australia. And
it happens all the time, and you get these so-called experts, and they're really just not putting their own ideas out there. They're pushing a specified, pre-scripted agenda, and in the case of the BBC, time and time again, they get caught out, and it's these hardcore activists who've literally been trained. I mean, that's kind of Soviet-style stuff. Here's how you say, here's how you put the spin. But we do see it in Australia, and, you know, the ABC do get caught out from time to time with what appears to be just a random member of the public suddenly turns out to be some kind of trained left-wing activist, some lovey, but there you go.
OK, last one. Ivanka Trump, she gets under people's skin as much as her dad at the moment. I saw a lot of footage of her over at the G20. Shinzo Abe made it clear that he invited her to speak at a gender session. A little bit of audio went viral. It came from the French. Ooh la la, they say. We didn't think it would, you know, turn into such a firestorm.
Who'd have thought,
I have to say, with Macron, I think it was probably put out there deliberately. But anyway, it's caused a whole sort of fight on social media. I'll put some of the little pictures, the memes up there for people, memes to have a look at. But is this fair or not fair?
Well, it's funny, so that's always a good thing. Anything in politics that uses humour, I think, is fantastic and should be encouraged because we don't have enough of it. So you've got some great memes, if you like, where they've put Ivanka Trump on as the fifth member on crossing the crossroads at Abbey Road. You've got turning up at all famous moments in history, which isn't an original idea, Peter. Actually, Woody Allen did it first in Zelig and did it very well with this character Zelig, who popped up in all the great moments of history. So there's a lot of humour in this, and I love all that. But the flip side, of course, is that, yes, they're mocking Ivanka Trump and they're suggesting she's a busybody and she's interfering. I never heard any of this about Chelsea Clinton or, you know, whenever it was... the Americans love the idea of political dynasties. So whenever it's a Kennedy or a Clinton, they're fantastic, isn't it great? They're out there speaking, they're doing this, they're doing that. But, of course, when they're from the Trump, it's somehow to be mocked and sneered at, and yet it's exactly the same process. But we're pretty used to that happening. But I think Donald Trump himself has a pretty wicked sense of humour, so I think he would probably be quite amused by it. I'm surprised they don't have us standing next to Kim Jong-un there on the DMZ.
Oh, that'll come.
That'll come.
That'll come. Talking to the troops, that'll come. Rowan Dean, right. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Peter.